Welcome to this webinar hosted by the Pennsylvania Association of Notaries. The title of today's presentation is Identifying Your Customer. The presentation will focus on the rules, regulations, and processes you need to know to identify your customer before a notarization. My name is John Morensel, and I'm one of 3 instructors at PAN. I'm joined by the other 2. First, we have Catherine Senko and Brian Crocker. We're going to start with a quick housekeeping video, hop right into the presentation, and then open the floor to a live Q&A session. Please hold your questions until after the presentation is complete. We anticipate this webinar should take roughly 30 to 45 minutes of your time today. So let's start with the housekeeping video. Hi there. Welcome to one of PAN's webinars. I'm glad you could join us today. Let's go over a few housekeeping items before we start with the presentation. Before we start, we recommend using Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox for your internet browser when participating in our webinars. Those seem to work best with connection and functionality. If you don't see the chat box on the right-hand side, make sure you click on the 3 white dots in the red box. That will expand the chat box onto your screen. Make sure when you're sending a message in the chat that you set it to Send to Everybody mode. Also, if you're asking a question, make sure it's set to Q&A mode. Next, you will want to make sure you check out the Files tab. This is where we will have files available to download for you. You can find the files by first making sure you click on the word File. Then, you will click on the up arrow on the right. That will expand the File tab up, where you will see all the available files. The same steps you just did to find the files, you will follow to find the weekly icebreaker poll. This is just a fun poll we like to throw together each week to get the webinar started off on the right foot. You will see at the top of the chat box, in yellow, a sticky note with the instructor shared email address. We will put this email up usually about 10 minutes after the webinar starts. You can email us if your questions didn't get answered. And lastly, if you're having connection issues throughout the webinar, we ask that you do not contact our customer service team. Unfortunately, they cannot assist you when it comes to connection issues in the webinars. What you can do though is, click on the reconnect button at the top of the screen. This usually resolves any lag or freezing of your screen. That wraps up our housekeeping items. Now on to the presentation.
Hello, and welcome to Identifying Your Customer, a PAN presentation. Section 306 of RLONA, the Pennsylvania Notary Law, states if a notarial act relates to a statement made in or a signature executed on a record, the individual making the statement or executing the signature shall appear personally before the notarial officer. The regulations further clarify this statement by saying, to appear personally before a notary public is to be physically present before the notary public when the notarial act is executed. The notary public shall be able to observe and interact with the individual making the statement or executing the signature. This means that the person must be in front of you at the time of the act, able to exchange documents and identification. You must be able to see one another clearly. This also means that if you are notarizing for your boss or your coworkers, they must be in the same room with you, not down the hall in their office, not at home while you are at home. It does allow for face shields and clear plastic separations, as long as documents can be exchanged and identification of the individual can clearly be made. Personal appearance is the first step in the notary process. Let's talk about identifying the individual. Once they are in front of you, there are 3 ways to identify them: personal knowledge, acceptable identification, and credible witness. Personal knowledge is defined by RLONA as the individual is personally known to the notarial officer through dealings sufficient to provide reasonable certainty that the individual has the identity claimed. The regulations further state that when using personal knowledge, satisfactory evidence is not required. That means no identifications are exchanged. In these cases, you should be certain that the person is who they say they are, and that you know them well. Know their first and last names. Note that even if you have personal knowledge of an individual, they must still personally appear in front of you at the time of the notary act. A second way to identify the customer is acceptable identification. This is the most common situation. Rulona states that the identification be current, government issued, and contain a signature or photograph, and be satisfactory to the notarial officer. You can use a passport, driver's license, or government identification, which is current, contains a signature or photograph, and is satisfactory to the notarial officer. This means a passport issued by a foreign government, which is current and unexpired, is good to be used, as long as it uses letters, characters, and a language that are read and understood by the notary public. This also means a driver's license or non-driver's identification card issued by the state or territory of Canada or Mexico can be used. It must be current and unexpired and use letters, characters, and a language that are read and understood by the notary public. A notary must use his or her own discretion when using identification credentials necessary to assure that a notarial officer of the identity of the individual. The examples here are the PA driver's license, which has both a picture and a signature. It is the most common ID you will see. The passport is from Australia and is in the English language, which means you can't accept it. If it were a foreign passport in a language you cannot read or understand, you could not accept that ID. The driver's license here is from Canada. It must also be in a language that you read and understand. If it is only in French or Spanish and you do not understand these languages, you should not accept it. Remember, the ID must be government issued, current, contain a signature or photograph, and be satisfactory to you, the notary. There are many types of ID that can be accepted which follow these rules. Some samples, such as inmate cards, tribal identification cards, and green cards, all appear on the screen here. Note that some of the cards which adhere to the rules do not contain a photograph, but only a signature. Example of these are the Social Security card and the Medicare cards. It is up to the notary's discretion to ask for additional identification if they feel that the individual cannot be identified with only a signature. What happens if the customer does not have proper identification? There is still a possibility that the notary can identify the individual using a credible witness. Rulona and regulations state that a person who is personally known to the notary officer and personally known to the customer may be a credible witness for the customer. The credible witness submits a verification of oath or affirmation stating that the person appearing before the notary is the person named in the document and the credible witness personally knows the individual. No identifications are shared with this type of scenario. The credible witness personally knows the notary and personally knows the customer. The credible witness is the go-between or the middleman. When using credible witness, the credible witness must complete a verification on oath or affirmation stating that the person is named in the document and that the credible witness knows the individual. PAN has a downloadable, fillable form in the member portal on their website for this type of transaction. The notary will execute the verification on oath or affirmation for the credible witness and record that in the notary's journal. And then the notary will perform the act for the customer. So 2 notary acts are being performed. 1, the verification on oath or affirmation for the credible witness, and 2, the notary act being performed for the customer. In summary, you must always demand personal appearance when notarizing, and you have 3 ways to identify your customer: personal knowledge, acceptable ID, and credible witness. We'll now open up the forum for questions and answers.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. So at this point, like she said, this will be the time. If you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. Please keep in mind there is about a 10 to 15-second delay from the time you send over your questions to the time they pop up on our end. And also, Brian put at the top of the screen in the yellow sticky note our email address. So it's instructors@notary.org. You could always email us after the webinar is over if you think of a question. And he also put the link to our YouTube page. So you will see playlists there for videos on how-tos and tutorials, things like that regarding notary, pen.work, and also prior webinars you will see there.
Thank you, Crystal.
No personal comments for Brian, though, from Crystal. That's all right.
All right, let's see here. So Cindy said, I'm sorry I was interrupted for a moment. Did I hear that a credible witness must be known by the notary? Cindy, that is true, because no IDs can be exchanged when a credible witness is used. The notary needs to know the credible witness personally, and then the credible witness knows the customer personally. So they act as a middleman. So no IDs are exchanged. You are correct.
And now the next question fell down the chat box, so I have to bring it back here. Amanda wants to know, how do we record issue and expiration dates if customers use a Medicare card or a Social Security card? The way the law reads, you only need to record issue and expiration dates if they are on the credential. So obviously on a Pennsylvania driver's license, for example, there is an issue and an expiration date. Some credentials, like a Social Security card, have neither. So you can describe, if you use a Social Security card, SSN or Social Security card, and then not list the number, obviously, for security purposes.
Alicia asks, can a notary notarize documents for a friend or relative? As long as it's not you or your spouse and you have a direct or financial interest in the documents, yes, you can notarize for a friend or relative. And if you know them personally, check the personal knowledge box and just put in the details section, friend, brother-in-law, whatever the relative is, or you can leave it blank and put a line through it.
All right, so Summer asks, where can I find practice tests? Summer, if you go to our website, www.notary.org, and up at the top right, you'll see a little tab. It says Member Portal. You'll click on that and log in. On the left-hand side, once you log in, it says Tutorials. Click on that, and down at the bottom, you'll see some information regarding, it's usually at the very last line, there's a way that you could do Rolona practice exams. So that's where you will find it.
And Kelly's in a difficult situation. She works in a hospital, and she's constantly being asked to notarize powers of attorney in the hospital rooms of patients. They often do not have their ID due to how they were admitted. What should or can I do? I always tell people you can't squeeze a square peg into a round hole. If you can't identify a customer with one of the methods described by the law, that customer, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to help them. So unless you know the patient personally, or the patient has a form of acceptable ID, or there's someone that you know who can act as a credible witness who also knows the patient, then there really isn't anything you can do for them.
Andrea asks, can I notarize documents for a land deed involving my siblings and me? You are not supposed to notarize things with you have a direct or financial interest in or for yourself. So I would say no to that. You would have a direct interest in the land deed there. I would find a different notary for that.
All right, so question rolled in. How do we log the credible witness in our logs? Do we log both the customer and the credible witness? Yes, that is correct. There's going to be two separate notarizations. The first notarization is that verification on oath for the credible witness. They're swearing to the identity of your customer. When you notarize that, that's your first notarization. That's going to be the first entry in your notary journal. Then when you notarize for the original customer, that's going to be your second notarization. So that would be the second one. And so that's how you keep it in order. First one for the credible witness, then a separate line for the second notarization for your customer.
Dale wants to know, is there a form available for the credible witness's oath? PAN created one for its members, and I will tell you that it's strictly based on the language that's in the law, that the credible witness is swearing to certain things. That form is available when you sign onto the member portal and go down the left-hand side of the screen, click on PAN Forms, and I believe the exact name is form of verification on oath or affirmation for a credible witness or by a credible witness.
Okay, Joanne asks, I thought a notary couldn't notarize a relative's document, so I can notarize my sister's or my mom's documents. Yes, as long as you do not have a financial or direct interest in the document, then you can notarize for them. The law says you cannot notarize for you or your spouse if you have a direct or financial interest in the documents. So if you do not have a direct interest in them, then you can notarize for your sister or your mother.
All right, so a private question came in, said, did I see that correctly on the screen? That an inmate ID card could be accepted. And yeah, that is correct. As long as the inmate ID is a government issued ID, is current, and it has a signature or a photograph, that could fall under acceptable ID. Yeah, that's the criteria. We always say use that checklist. Is it government issued? Is it current? Does it have a signature or a photograph? If it's yes to all three of those, then yep, it can be accepted.
I'm trying to find where it says that actually in the regulations. Yeah. So I can read exactly what it says. I believe it says an inmate identification card, but the inmate has to be in custody at that time. So that's a specific item that is acceptable based on a list that's in the regulations. But in the end, if you're not satisfied that that inmate identification card identifies that person, you're not required to take it. Let's see. Shelley says, if a notary, I'm doing a notary for a customer who has ID, but their signature requires a witness. This witness does not need to be known to me, the notary. Is that correct? If there's a witness for a document, you have no requirement to know that person or identify that person for that matter, unless you're actually notarizing that witness's signature. Now, it is a good business practice to identify the witness and to list that witness's name in the remarks section, but no, you don't have to know them personally.
Okay, Kelly asks a follow-up question. In hospital power of attorney, our social workers are providing the patients with a power of attorney that has a place to notarize principal's signature, but not the agent's signature. Should the agent's signature be notarized? When the agent uses, I'm trying to picture the form in my head, sorry here. When the agent, the principal's signature definitely needs to be notarized. And then when the agent uses that power of attorney to execute the act, or that should also be notarized. I believe. You piggyback on that, anyone?
There is something called an agent's acknowledgement, which is very confusing. And it's a statement that the agent signs. But in my brain, the only signature that requires that acknowledgement is the principal's signature.
All right. So Amanda asked or stated, I mostly encounter ID issued when working with either the elderly or the Amish. I know the Amish have the means to get non-photo ID cards, but few do. Yeah, in situations like that, when you deal with the elderly or the Amish, you can get a social security card that is something that could be done. They do typically have socials issued to them because a social is government issued, it's current, has a signature. For the elderly, that's something that could be used as well. But me personally, I would also like to see something that shows that is them as well. For the elderly, maybe I'll look at their expired ID as well, so I can see the photograph and then tie it in with the social. But yeah, with the Amish, I would say a lot of people use either socials or personal knowledge or credible witness. That's what I see a lot.
Joan says, where is the credible witness affirmation to be kept? Now, this is an interesting question, Joan, because we got it several times yesterday on the webinars, and there is no answer. The law and the regulations don't give you any guidance whatsoever. So we have come up with a suggestion, best business practice from PAN, that you attach that verification on oath or affirmation to the document that you are notarizing for the customer. But that's just our guidance.
Lisa asks, can you notarize for your ex-spouse? Law doesn't say anything about exes, just says spouse. So I imagine if you do not have a financial interest in the document, then an ex would be okay.
And then Carol's question was just answered by Brian. She had the same question as Joan. So Jody asked, if my parents are giving their car to my sister, can I notarize the title? That could be tricky. I always say an ounce of doubt, I would have somebody else notarize. I'm doubting that situation, so that was probably what I would recommend. Reason being, do you have a financial interest? Probably not, unless, unfortunately, your sister would pass and then you would inherit that vehicle. That's a possibility. Or the direct interest I might be worried about. Would you ever borrow her vehicle? Would you ever ride along in that vehicle with her? In some people's eyes, that could be a direct interest. So I would say play it safe and let somebody else do the title work.
Linda says, my husband owns a snowmobile and wants to sell it. Will I be able to do the notarization? And again, John just answered this question. If you or your spouse has a direct or financial interest in the transaction, then you shouldn't be notarizing. Certainly, if your husband is selling his snowmobile and he's going to get money for it, he has a financial interest. Therefore, you should not be notarizing.
Bill asks, if a document gives the option for witness and/or notary and the customer wants the document notarized, do I need to require that the witness section is also signed? I was worried about leaving something blank on the document. If it has spaces for witnesses, I would fill them in with a witness watching the signature. It doesn't look like the type of document you're talking about requires notarization of the witness signatures, but so just have a witness sign the document.
All right, so Kelly says, so should I notarize the agent at the time I'm notarizing the principal, or should the agent take their page to the recorder of deeds to sign and notarize? Kelly, like Brian was stating earlier, and I'm in agreement, your typical power of attorney, the only signature that is being notarized on that is going to be the principal. Even though it says acknowledgement, it says agent's acknowledgement, they're just using that for what it's worth. The definition of acknowledgement, they're acknowledging that they are receiving the power from the principal. So that's not required to be notarized.
Interestingly enough, David and Cecilia, if you look above, are actually saying those same things.
Because there we go.
That's all right.
That's funny.
That's
there we
why
go.
I'm laughing. I'm reading what I was looking for the next question. Like, those aren't questions. So let me get to the next question here. Having issues with my mouse. Let's see. Amanda, is that next?
Yes.
Many Amish women still have Social Security cards in maiden names. I assume I can't use those. First of all, even though a Social Security card is on the list of acceptable ID, it does meet the standards. It is current. It is government issued. It does have a signature. In general, I would personally not recommend taking them by themselves because I don't think they're necessarily reliable. There's no picture. Now, there doesn't need to be a picture, but I really I want more information. Now, to get to your question, when it comes to maiden names and the woman is married, ultimately you have the responsibility to know that the person in front of you is the person who should be signing the document. If you can't make that connection between the maiden name and the married name that's on the document, I would not notarize.
Michelle asks, can I notarize a legal power of attorney for my parents? This is one I would not do because I would think if something were to happen to your parents and you inherit something, then I would not do that. It just is too close, and it seems a direct interest, or could be a financial interest in the document for yourself. So I would not.
All right. So Leah says, is there a way that you could add all the answers to all the questions? That way we can refer back to the notes and questions. This is a very informative webinar. Leah, unfortunately, we don't have the capability of doing that. Like Webinar Jam doesn't have the option where we can just like take it and put it into a Excel sheet and pull the questions and answers so easily. What we would need to do is go through the replay, write them all out, and then copy and paste, which would be extremely time consuming. Unfortunately, we just don't have the time to do that. We are preparing to go back on the road. Brian's actually leaving on Monday. So our hands are gonna be really tied. What I would say we could do for you is this: watch the replays on our YouTube page, or when we do send them to you. Even though you're not gonna have them in written form, you could always go back and listen to them as many times as you like, and you will have them there at your resources.
Amanda's apologizing for being full of questions. There's no reason to apologize, Amanda. Can we use voter registration cards as proper ID? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the proposed regulations. Are voter registration cards on the list of things that are acceptable? The answer is no. Now I'm going to go back to the law. The law says you can take driver's licenses, photo ID cards, passports, or something that is government issued, current, has a photograph or a signature, and on top of that is satisfactory to the notary. So if it's government issued, which I believe it is, and it has a photograph or a signature, and this is important, you are satisfied that that voter registration card identifies that person, then yes, you could take it. But again, I would be very, very cautious, again, because I'm assuming without seeing it that a voter registration card does not have a photograph on it.
Mine does not. Crystal asks or gives us some information, section 20 of PA Code, chapter 56, power of attorney regulation. Agent has to acknowledge, but doesn't need to be notarized.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kristen. And then Shelley asks, we are seeing more powers of attorney come through with wording that the principles of sound mind and body, and it is requiring witness. We require that they provide their own witnesses since we do not have personal knowledge. We are getting some pushback from customers. The witness is just there to witness the signature. So, and they don't need notarized. In a power of attorney though, does the signature, the witnesses need notarized?
Typically not. Yeah, typically not. So yeah, like Kathy was saying, I mean, they're going to give you pushback. That's kind of out of your control. You don't need to provide the witnesses. If you have them handy, that's okay. But they just need to be 18 years of age or older. You want to make sure you ID them properly as well. But yeah, they're just simply watching the principal sign, like Kathy was saying.
Let's see. And Jody, my sister, or is it your question, John?
You could go take it.
Okay. You don't want to answer that question, do you?
I didn't know. I didn't look at it yet.
All right. My sister, I looked at it and I'm formulating an answer. My sister and I have power of attorney for our parents. They want her to have one of their cars. My sister does not live close and my parents are housebound, can she take the title and get it notarized without my parents being present using the power of attorney? That's the whole idea of a power of attorney, Jody, is that the person who has been assigned agent status has the ability to act on behalf of the principals, in this case, your parents. So the only thing I'm concerned about, and again, this is a kind of a legal thing, powers of attorney, is it given to you or your sister, or is it given to both of you equally? Because if it's given to both of you equally, then in some cases you both need to be there to execute the transaction. And that's a question that I really can't answer specifically for you, but just something to think about.
I'll take the next one then, and then Kathy will follow up.
We'll get back in the regular rotation since I jumped in.
No, it's okay. We are caught up on the questions. Usually we say these webinars take about 30 to 45 minutes. We're at the 31-minute mark right now, so we're right on track. We expected a handful of questions, which we've gotten fantastic questions, a lot of great conversation so far. Please keep the questions rolling if you have them. We'll give a few more moments to make sure no other questions roll in before we would wrap it up.
And don't forget about our email address, instructors@notary.org. That's shared between the three of us, and we're all going to get that. And if you're interested in visiting our YouTube page, specifically the playlist page, you can use that link that's up there in the yellow sticky note as well. Was there a follow-up that came in, John?
Yeah, so Shelley says follow up, sound, mind, and body. When this wording is in the documents, POA or will, we can witness without knowing them. Can we witness without knowing them? For a POA, I'm going to tell you, you definitely don't want to be the witness on that as in the notary. For your witness's sake, you just want to ID them to make sure they are 18 years of age. And what I would recommend doing is putting their names maybe in the remarks section of your journal. Even though you're not notarizing for them, I would still list their name and mention that they were a witness in the remarks section of that. But you still need to ID them. Even if you don't personally know them, you want to ID them.
Yeah, Title 20, which was quoted before by one of our participants, specifically states that the notary cannot be one of the witnesses. Mm-hmm. So I agree with John on that one. Karen, FYI, and this is not a question, I heard that if you're getting something notarized at the AAA Motor Club that needs a witness, you need to bring your own witness, and that is their policy. And that's a good thing to know, Karen, for anyone who's going to AAA, that they do have that policy. Thank you for that information.
April asks, how long does the test usually take to complete? The notary exam, it's not long, but it varies for every person. I can tell you how long it took me was about 30 minutes. But they do give you more than enough time to complete the exam.
Yeah, you have an hour.
It does vary from person to person.
Yeah, you have an hour.
You got complimented on your blouse, Kathy, from Lisa. There you go.
Nice.
Couple thank yous.
Thank you.
Carol asks, can't a traveling notary notarize the parent's signature as the seller on the title, and then the sister take the title to the tag agency to finish the process? I mean, that could be an option if they find a mobile notary that's willing to do title work. A lot of standard notaries out there will not notarize PennDOT titles, even though by law they're allowed. PAN recommends not doing them as a standard notary. We leave the title work typically up to authorized PennDOT agents. But if you wanted to find a mobile notary that came out, notarized the title for the parents, then that could possibly be an option too. But I think the power of attorney would be the safer bet.
So we're getting some thank yous coming in, and Amanda says, I'm often asked to notarize the deed package for sellers of residential real estate. Do you have a course on the deed? We do not. Maybe something I can go back and watch. Here's my recommendation, Amanda. Again, if you can look at the document and you can find the notary wording, the venue and the statement, and from the notary statement determine what it is you're supposed to do, then you can notarize it. If you are not comfortable notarizing, then you are not required to. Now, there is a webinar going back a month or so called Recognizing Notary Wording that may help you in that area of knowing what to do when you find certain notary statements. And that's on our YouTube page.
Michelle asks, does the notary have the responsibility of making sure the principles of sound mind and body? And what the notary can do is ask a few questions. Do you understand the document? Can you explain the document to me? And I would assume if they can do that, then they are of sound mind and body.
All right. And Shelley just mentioned that the AAA branch does require witnesses as well. So that's good. And it states that the principle of mind, sound, and body, and that does fall on the notary. They need to make sure that whoever they're notarizing for is in the right state of mind. They willingly want to sign that document. So that does fall on the notary.
Yeah, in fact, I'm looking in our first-time notary book. I was looking at this morning. It says you have the right to refuse service if you believe your customer is not competent, doesn't understand. So right there, if they're not of sound mind, those two things are off the table and you can say no.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that. I cut you off at the end.
No, it's great piggybacking there. And see, some people are already saying have a nice weekend. Thank yous. Renee's going to the beach for the week. I am jealous. Yeah, I was going to say catch some rays for me, Renee. So yeah, I was going to say we'll give it a few more moments just to play it safe to see if any other questions roll in.
Give me one more question. I can handle it. Marjorie's saying, thank you. Have a good weekend. Shelley, have a great day. Thank you. Lisa says, thank God it's Friday. Or thank goodness it's Friday, depending on who you are. So another 30 seconds or so, keeping in mind we have that delay. Lots of thank yous. My dog is at home, Carol. I'm at work. Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking about. Is like, oh, no Toby today. So yeah, we got the view of part of our building in the parking garage behind us.
One more
I had
question.
more questions, but an Amish guy with no ID just came in and interrupted me. It's pretty funny. And that was the topic we had today.
How about that?
Amanda, if you do have questions, and instructors at notary.org, you can always send them there.
Mm-hmm. There you go, Brian. There's your last question.
Oh, was that me? Okay. MJ says, I didn't realize you needed to include the issue and expiration date of the driver's license. Did I hear that correctly? You did, MJ. In fact, in our journal, I don't have one with me right here, but at the top of the column, it says description and issue and expiration date. So if you're following what it says in the column header, it's really difficult to go wrong. Now, if you're not using a PAN journal, that's something you'll just need to remember.
More thank yous.
A little too relaxed here. Maybe I should stand up. Leaning on the desk. I usually do these in an armchair, and I'm standing at my desk, which is not necessary.
Hear my dog. He just came into the room.
Oh no! Is the mailman there?
No, there's a storm coming in, so he's joining me in my room now.
Oh my gosh, my dog and my cats are terrified by storms. But you don't need to know that, folks.
Lisa asks, is it best practice to get a fingerprint? In Pennsylvania, you do not need to have a fingerprint of your customer. In some notary law in some other states, you may need that, but you do not need that in Pennsylvania.
In fact, it could be an infringement on their personal information if you take it. The reason you have that probably in your journal is some organizations have journals that will work in all 50 states. And off the top of my head, I know that California has a requirement for the right thumbprint of the seller of a property when they're notarizing the deed.
Dale asks, will these continue as you get back on the road? We have every intention to continue as much as we can. We're actually going to meet on Monday to discuss that and look at our schedule and try to make sure we have at least 2 of us to be able to do these. More than likely, they're not going to be every Thursday and Friday. We might just do them every Friday because we will be traveling a lot on Thursday still, coming back from the areas that we teach in. But we should be able to continue. We're going to do our best. That is a goal because it's been received, overwhelming. We've been getting great responses on these.
Yeah, when we have people in the office, it's not a problem. But if we're all traveling at the same time, it's probably going to be a little more difficult to have them. Not that you really need to know what we do every day, but we are calling each and every participant with reminders before the seminar. We're sending emails out to each participant. We need to come into the office like I am today to pack all my material. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't taught a seminar since the first week of February, and I don't even remember what to pack. So I have to think.
Yeah.
Lisa, I'm glad you like it.
Tons. Yeah, as I say, the responses we get have been fantastic. We've been great we've been really enjoying these. This is new to us. We didn't start doing this until the pandemic, and I think we found something that we want to continue to do, even when the pandemic's over. I think the questions are over, so we'll end up wrapping it up here. I always say stay safe and stay healthy. Since it's Friday, enjoy your weekend, and hopefully we see you next time. And I'll leave it up to Kathy and Brian here.
Hey, if you're going to be in my afternoon reappointment class next Wednesday in Allentown, you may actually get a call from me today, so be ready for that.
I won't call you yet. Yes.
Bye, all.
See you, everybody.